Hi, Pat Lowinger here for Southern California Warhammer Radio for our video segment. Today, what we're doing is we're going to be talking about how to paint Chaos Warriors using the Army Painter system. What I've done here today is taken a unit of 5 Chaos Warriors mounted, so they're Chaos Knights, and sprayed them using Army Painter primer, the plate mail metal color primer. Got to shake it up real good, follow the directions, and make sure you use it in a well ventilated system. But this is the actual product sprayed directly onto plastic. There is no other prep work done, although I did use the Gale Force 9 bases versus the GW bases, but these were all sprayed directly onto plastic, and it coated really well and did not obscure any of the detail. And what I'm going to do is paint this model in the next 15 to 20 minutes, putting directly onto the Army Painter paint, the primer. And in 15 minutes I'll be back to show you where we're at and show you some other stuff and dip it. So I'll see you in 15. Well, hi, we're back. I spent about 20 minutes painting and letting this guy dry. It's the model I showed you earlier. Just a quick note, colors I used were Bleach Bone, Shining Gold, Blood Red, Chaos Black, Graveyard Earth, and Skull White for the teeth. But other than that, I didn't paint any additional colors on the model, and when I say the colors are painted flat, that means there's no additional highlighting. I purposely didn't highlight. I did one area of detail on the sword, not even really detailed, just tried to make it look kind of cool for dipping. But that's the effect you're going for. A quick 20-minute paint job to get an effect that's going to look good on the table. Now, what I'm going to do is show you how to dip. All right, what I'm going to show you now is the technique, which is commonly called the splash on, or I call the paint on dip method. And for your larger models, since they actually won't fit in the can, you're gonna have to do it anyway. So take some dip and initially liberally apply it to all the areas of the model. Use an old brush, because pretty much unless you just save it for dipping, the brush is going to be pretty useless after this for any other stuff you have to do. You're going to cover the model pretty thickly. That's a good term, thickly. But you're going to apply liberally at first, and then as it starts to gum up, starting to thicken, we'll show you how to pull off the areas that you don't want so done. So go ahead and apply it to the model, getting all areas of the model. So as you see that, so like I'm continuing putting it on. Like I said, you got to put enough on so it'll grab into the corners and the recesses. I'm going to spin the model for you so you can see what I've done on the other side. That's about the thickness I got it on there. Okay, make sure you get it in the creases of the chainmail and the guy, and make sure you get it on his back and underneath the areas you want to have really stand out. The more important, it's better to put too much on and then have to pull it off than not put enough on initial steps. Okay, so that's my advice. I'm putting it on, like I said, pretty heavily, because what I'll do is I'll shade the chains in and all the cool parts that you want your details show. Now what I'm doing is letting it sit for about 15 to 20 seconds on each section, and it's starting to form. It's starting to pull a little bit, like you'll see here on the shield. It's starting to pull, so I pull those extras off, go over it once, pull a little bit extra, pull a little extra off here, pull a little extra off his helmet. Make sure I get some up there on that one skull. So you're going to kind of like go over the model and check the areas to make sure that it's not too much on any one spot. Okay, you're going to want to make sure it's any area that you want a lot of contrast shading. You're going to want to pull it off the extra areas, so any area that it's pulled. Now you'll notice it's pulling down the bottom of the base also. That's not so much to worry about, because we're going to cover that up later when we do when we actually base it, because I base my models after now. I originally based them before, but frankly I really like doing some really cool basing, and like the shield, see, it'll continue to pull up a little bit. You go over it a few times, leave enough on there though, and pull it out of the recesses, like right here in the bridle. You're going to want to pull that out, because that's a natural pull point. But after you do one or two, you'll start seeing how it works. Pull it out. Make sure you cover that sword pretty well. And sometimes you got to turn it upside down to make sure you get the right stuff on. But all in all, that's about where I'd get it to. Giving you a 360-degree look at him now. Okay, that's my Chaos Warrior. My Chaos Knight. I did the same thing with my Chaos Warriors. That's why I keep saying Chaos Warriors. Making sure you get a little extra on there. Behind shields, where parries you're not going to see, putting a little extra on there helps some shading effect for later. But really, that's about where you're going to leave it. Okay, you may just once in a while scrape a little bit extra out of the pool places. But that's a completed Chaos Knight. It looks really dark right now, and that's kind of the funny part about it. Is in a minute I'll show you what it's going to look like dry, and with what I call one final Army Painter touch-up. Make sure you don't. One thing is areas where there's gaps. Sometimes the Army Painter will go between there. Make sure you pull those out so you don't just have drying issues with a little bit of fanning. And that's where paint sticks on two different places and kind of forms a little ridge. But other than that, that is a completely dipped model, and in a little while it's going to be suitable for wargaming, and it'll look really, really cool. So with that, I'm going to set this one down. In 24 to 48 hours, it's 24 actually, unless you use so much dip that it won't dry in 24 hours, but I've never seen it take longer than 24 hours, and usually within 12 it's going to dry, and you're going to have something that looks just like this. This is the same color palette except I used some greens, and all I did was when I was done, I added highlights on some parts of the skull and teeth with skull white. So it was dried and then matte varnished, and then added a few, very minor. If you notice, it's only the teeth and one part of the skull around the eyes and the teeth of the skull that I actually came back and did any highlighting. But that's what it's going to look like when you're done, with no basing done yet. But that's what the same color palette that I used on the other one, except the painted the sword red. But I painted this one with a green highlight and the big fangy face. So you can get detail on the skull. You'll see I went back, and on the guy's skull helmet I applied some just minor highlighting. Okay, took me less than a minute, and you can look at the detail on the shield. Okay, the detail on the shield, I didn't add anything to it other than a dab of white for some of the teeth. Same thing with the skulls on the horse's helmet. I went back and redid the teeth, and the teeth were done with and the area around the eyelet was done. But other than that, it's the exact same color that it was after the dip. And I know it looks thick, but that's the exact same amount of dip as from the first model that I just displayed and this model now, and it'll take 24 hours to dry. Basing. This is a model that I dipped, okay, and I based using a really dark earth tone. And the reason I'm showing a really dark earth tone, I normally don't do scorched brown only. Usually I put some bleach bone or something else in there to lighten it up. But like I said, this is speed painting. In order to get the sand to stick, I'd use regular old crazy glue, and I just put bleach bone on top of it, and then applied some static grass. Now this model here, total paint time that I'm showing you is less than an hour, and that included the basing. So between spraying it, basing it, and painting it, that's less than 1 hour for a totally decent tabletop quality. Now in this model also, you'll notice I came back in and redid some highlighting on the horns, but that's the only post being done highlight that I did. So the rest of it is just the natural Army Painter effect on the horns and a little bit of touch up on the shield. But really 90% of the work is being done by Army Painter. One important thing to note on Army Painter that a lot of people forget is it covers up a lot of your small mistakes. So small mistakes, you can just ignore them, because the Army Painter themselves actually went through and fixed your basically bad paint job. It's not meant to look perfect, but when it's all said and done, it looks pretty damn good. So I'm gonna have to definitely give it an A+ for Chaos Knights. Well, that's it, and like I said, Army Painter brand products. So make sure you ask for it by name at your local game store. And once again, this is Pat Lowinger for Southern California Warhammer Radio, with special thanks to John Engie behind the camera, and Mike Gardner, who's sitting off and doing nothing but making fun and drawing penises. Bye.